Uh, my name is Becky Robinson. I'm thrilled today to be here with Christian Greiser, and we'll be getting started in just a few moments. As you're coming in, I hope you'll take a moment to locate the chat in the bottom of your Zoom panel, because here at Weaving Influence, we want to create an inclusive community where you can connect in community with other leaders and learners, and we would love to hear from you. So if you could take a moment to let us know where you're calling in from today. If you happen to be calling in as part of your professional development and you are representing an organization, we would love to hear that as well, so that we could give a shout out to your organization. And so we'd love to see that in the chat. So welcome in Orange, California, in Lubbock, Texas, in Munich. Welcome to Dick in St. Helena. Welcome. Let's see, these are coming in so fast. Arkansas, some more in Germany. Pittsburgh, London. It is wonderful to see you. There's another person in Germany, Denver, and a shout out to Tristan, who is working at the Oregon Department of Revenue, Oregon, and working from home. So it's amazing to see so many of you coming in, and so many of you also in Germany, which is where Christian lives. And we are excited to engage and learn with you today. So thank you again for being with us. We do invite you throughout today's event to go ahead and use the chat. If you happen to have a question that arises that you would like to ask Christian, I will incorporate those throughout the event as it's appropriate, or we will have a Q&A toward the end of this hour together. So please feel free to engage with each other. Feel free to place your questions in the chat. I do also want to let you know that if it's useful to you, we do have captions enabled on this call. So we want you to be able to experience this call, and you can turn on those captioning tools in the bottom of your Zoom panel as well. So before we get any further, I want you to see this beautiful book. It's behind me as well. This is the book that we are here to learn from today: Remove, Replace, Restart, the Essential Maintenance Manual for Your Engine for Success. And we had the pleasure of supporting Christian and launching this book earlier this year. And now we have the chance to dive into the key concepts of the book. So let me tell you a little bit about my friend and client, Christian Greiser. He's an executive coach and management consultant, and he guides leaders, decision makers, and entrepreneurs on their personal development journeys, helping them figure out their values, talents, and strengths. And to that work, he brings his experience as a senior strategy consultant with operational leadership experience, but he also brings an intuitive understanding of personality and business. And what I have experienced about Christian is that he's exceedingly human and relational. And if you follow him on LinkedIn and Instagram, you'll see the way he brings his own unique personality to sharing valuable content with online audiences, which I have loved seeing. One of the cool things you may not know about Christian is that he worked at Boston Consultancy Group for many years and led one of the largest practice groups worldwide. Another interesting fact about Christian is that he and his wife divide their time between Germany and Greece. So I hope you'll get to know Christian a bit more on today's call. And I'm so excited to learn with you all today. So before we dive in any deeper, we do want to take a moment to get your feedback on a poll. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. We want to learn a bit about you as we begin our learning today. So we are curious, have you ever found yourself at a pivotal turning point in your career where you felt the need for change or growth? And if you want to tell us in the chat, I'd also love to hear what was that like for you? Or if you have any other comments about what you experienced when you found yourself at a pivotal turning point in your career. Potentially you are finding yourself at that pivotal turning point now. And if that's true, we'd love to hear that in the chat as well. I'm going to give you just a couple more seconds. And Christian, I'm curious if you have any predictions about how this poll will shake out.
So first of all, many thanks, Becky, for the introduction. My expectation is that there will be a lot of experience being at the turning point. I think most of us have experienced that at one point or another in our life.
All right, well, let's see. So the reality is that 100% of the people who answered our poll have found themselves at a turning point in their careers. Yeah. So how were you so certain? And there are some comments in the chat. It looks like Crystal is at that point right now. Sebastian is sharing that he reinvented himself completely from scratch 10 years ago. And several other people are saying that they're at a turning point now. So that this content today will be exceedingly useful to them.
Yeah, great.
So how were you so certain, Christian, that people would have this experience?
I was judging a bit based on my coaching experience, and not only that, but also based on the conversations which I have with friends, even with family. So many people thinking about that. And my feeling is, Wendy, we are living in a time where this is even increasing. There's so many things changing around us that we are basically forced to think, to reinvent ourselves or to change.
Well, let's dive in. So in the book, you use a really interesting analogy of a car to talk about your engine for success. And I know that you intentionally chose the car for that analogy. So can you share with us a little bit about why you think a car is a useful analogy for understanding our career journeys?
Yeah. And while you do the introduction, I find it already very funny with this comparison with a car and people. But there was indeed a reason. So there are so many books about coaching and coaching theory around. And my goal was to find a simple metaphor to make the concept easy to grasp and to stick. Now, my background is engineering. I'm in engineering. That was my first training, an aerospace engineer. And I use a lot of technical analogies in my coaching already. And to me, a car seemed to be a good metaphor because we all drive cars. We understand the concept of a car, and we understand the difficulties when driving a car. Because when a warning light comes on, we stop our car. We go to a garage. We try to understand the root cause of the problem. We regularly change oil of the car. We remove old parts. We replace them with new ones. And before we buy a new car, we do a test drive. Interestingly enough, we don't do that when it comes to ourselves. We ignore our inner warning light and we just keep going, like believing we have superpowers, but we don't have that. Maybe we don't understand what our inner warning light is. Sometimes we detach from pain and feelings. In psychology, we would call that dissociation. That's something people do in material arts. And that's dangerous from a technical perspective. Just disconnecting the temperature probe doesn't mean that the motor or the engine is cool. It's still hot. We just don't know. So that is risky. Furthermore, we have blind spots, but we don't try to understand the root causes of it. We find it difficult to let go of old habits and principles. That is like getting rid of old oil, if you use the technical metaphor. At the same time, we struggle to replace it with new behavior and with new principles. And we hesitate to reinvent ourselves from time to time because we don't know how to get started. So in other words, my feeling is we treat our cars better than we treat ourselves. And to that end, the car to me seemed to be a perfect analogy to understand how we maybe should treat ourselves. Maybe there's other metaphors you could use, but this car metaphor to me was one that worked quite well with some of my clients.
So this seems super memorable to me because we could maybe use getting in our car as a reminder to consider, am I treating myself today as well as I'm treating my car? Or when that warning light comes on, we can do a check-in with ourselves to say, what are the warning lights that might be showing up for me today? So I love how memorable and sticky that idea of the car metaphor is. And we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Does that idea resonate with you? Because when Christian says we treat our cars better than we treat ourselves, like I'm nodding along. And I'm wondering if you are as well. All right. So, in thinking about careers, I'm curious to hear when career stumbling blocks arise, how we can begin to address those. And the book outlines these 6 R's. So I would love for you to introduce those 6 R's as we move ahead with our conversation.
Yeah. And
There's a
maybe
few of them on the book.
yeah.
There's only 3, though.
3 of them. I would like to start with 4. Let me start with a very personal story. And I would like to share the story of my first car. My first car, my dream car, was a Renault R4. Maybe some people from Europe know this car. If you know the car, then just drop yes into the chat. It's a Renault R4. It was a French car with this French flair and French lifestyle. And I loved this car. And this car, that was the most important thing, had enough space for my drum set. At the time, I was a musician. I was traveling around, playing with different bands. So that R4 was a perfect car. The problem was, from a technical side, it was not really reliable. And I was often traveling with a friend. He, by the way, was the bass player in our band. And he started joking about my car. And at one point he said, Christian, you know what? To me, the R4 is a symbol. It's a symbol for return, repair, restart, relax. And I still have this old joke in my head when I was sitting in a coaching meeting and I was coaching a senior executive of an engineering company. And we started playing around with that. And then later on, I took it with me, this old joke. And then I thought, maybe that could serve as a basis for a framework, because somehow this has a bit of a relation to some of the problems I was talking in the coaching session. And out of this, I developed this framework with the 6 R's: reduce speed, resolve, remove, replace, rigorously test, and restart. And what does it stand for? Reduce speed basically is about managing our own resources. We all want to avoid burning out, and therefore we must treat our resources carefully. Very often we overestimate ourselves, we drive long stretches, we don't take a break, and then our own engine for success burns out, and we want to avoid this. So this is the first and very, very important chapter: reduce speed, take care of your resources. The second one is resolve. And resolve has a lot to do with understanding our blind spots. As I said, we bring our car to the garage. And in the same way, at times, we need to take a look under our own hood. We need to open it and to understand what is the real reason for our problem. We all know this. There are turning points in each career when it seems like nothing is going right. Maybe business is running poorly. We receive a bad performance review, or we receive bad feedback. And that's the point where we need to dig deeper. And what I often find is that we believe we understand the root cause. One example, I often have clients that come to me and say, I have a time management problem. I have so many things on my desk. I have not enough time. Christian, please teach me the latest and greatest on time management. But in fact, the problem is more related to their personality. The real problem is a deep-seated belief that they feel they have to do everything themselves. They can't delegate because they don't trust others. So this has nothing to do with time management. It's a trust problem. And you only understand that when you go deep. So this is resolve, understanding the real problem, the real root cause of our problem, and not just looking at the symptoms. And then we add the remove part, removing parts. And for us, it's often very difficult to let go of old models of success. They made us successful, but from time to time, we need to get rid of them, because if we just stick to them, but the environment changes, we are on a wrong track. So this is not easy, but learning to let go is super important. That's remove. And after we've removed something, of course, we need to replace it. That is the question of how can we adapt new habits? installing new parts, if you want, in our car. And that is so easy, we all believe. I just take a new habit and I just do it, and I will succeed for 1 week. But in the second week, my willpower will not be that strong anymore. And in the third week, probably I've forgotten about everything. So it's not only about willpower, there's much more behind it. So how can I effectively adopt new habits? That's the 4th chapter in the book. The 5th chapter is rigorously test. And that is about learning to reinvent ourselves. Why do we have to reinvent ourselves? Because the environment is changing. If you look in Google, or if you do a Google search on reinvent yourself, you will find more than 2 million hits. This is really a big topic, reinventing yourself. No wonder, because digitization and AI is turning the whole world upside down. So we need to reinvent ourselves as well. This chapter is about when do I need to reinvent myself and how do I reinvent myself? How is that working? And that is about experimenting, trying new things, meeting new people, reading new books. That is how I reinvent myself. And the last chapter, Restart, is a bit of a more difficult chapter. This is how to deal with a career break. Maybe it's a voluntary career break because I was on a longer sabbatical, or it's an involuntary career break because I lost my job. And what I do in this book, I introduce a framework which I call Return. And R stands for reactivate your network. E stands for explore your options. T, to take time to set realistic goals. U for updating your skills. R for regaining confidence with the right mindset. And N, to navigate the unknown. So restart is to gain momentum after a career break. So that's it. The 6 R's: reduce speed, resolve, remove, replace, rigorously test, and restart.
Well, as I'm listening to you, Christian, I'm amazed, first of all, by how fast you can rattle those off and remember them, but also realizing that this new book is translated from German. So I'm so curious about how that worked with the words in German and the letters and all of that. That's so interesting. Was that a hard transition?
And that was the toughest part. Spot on, Becky. In Germany, it's the 6 E's. Yeah.
Okay.
That's difficult to translate now because it's German words, but that was not so easy. We spent some time, but that was the crucial part. But in the end, I was super happy. And in Germany, when I tell the story with the R4, I always have to explain that the R was then translated into E, but in English, it was directly. But because at the time we were talking English with my friend, we were playing English songs, and therefore we were using these English terms. So this part was the first. That's the nice part of it.
Yes. So you were coming back to those words that originally fueled the story. So I've seen a lot of chat about these R's, and I think a lot of resonance around how difficult it is to build new habits, but we'll get to that. But let's first talk a little bit about this idea of reducing speed. And this certainly resonates with me, this feeling like we can't reduce our speed or things will fall apart, or that we have these certain goals that we're working toward, and if we slow down, we might miss out on achieving them. So I'm wondering why, and if you can share some tips for reducing speed and why we need to do this first.
Yeah. The why. Let me start again with a little story. A coach once told me, Christian, there are 3 development stages you're running through, and you need to learn 3 things. That is to lead yourself, to lead others, and to lead the organization. And then he would ask me, what do you think is most difficult? And I, at the time being a young consultant, I said, it's leading the organization because that's the most complex thing. And he said, no, it's not. It's leading yourself. It's leading yourself because to be able to lead, you need to understand who you are and who you are not. And that's not easy. That's very difficult. And we all know, or some of you know, that 2,000 years ago at the Oracle of Delphi, there was this letters above the entrance, know thyself. And probably that was for a very good reason. But how can we get to know ourselves better? And the only way to do that is to get perspective. We need some distance to see ourselves. Now imagine yourself watching a wonderful painting from Claude Monet, and you're standing like this in front of the picture. You see nothing. What you need to do is to recognize the picture, you need some distance. And it's the same with the patterns in our life. We need some distance to see them. If we're too close, we can't recognize our own patterns. And this is the reason why we need to reduce the speed. We need to get out of the race from time to time to gain perspective, to have some distance. That's number one. The second reason is we need to cool down our engine for success, to take a break, and we need to recharge our batteries. Now you might say, this idea is not new. This is a very old one. We've talked a lot about that. That's true. Work-life balance is a topic in every second coaching session I have. And even many religions prescribe timeouts in the form of prayer hours or religious holidays. Nevertheless, it seems to be super difficult for many of us to find this time out in the busy business world today. But the more difficult it is, the more important it is to do that. And I remember a Zen master I was working with many years back, and he said, because I was saying, I don't know if I find the time to meditate 30 minutes a day. And he said, okay, I understand that. If you can't find 30 minutes a day to meditate, you probably need 60 minutes. And I still remember that. If we can't find 2 hours a day or a week or whatever to take for ourselves, we probably need much more time. Martin Luther, one of the most significant figures in Christian history, said, if you work a lot, you have to pray a lot. And basically that also means to take time off. And Tony Robbins gives us a bit more of a modern version. He says, if you don't have 10 minutes for yourself, you don't have a life. So I feel reducing speed is the first step, because if we want to reinvent ourselves, or to learn new habits or whatever it is, first we need to reserve some time for ourselves. I had to learn this as a consultant to ensure a sustainable career over 20 years. What's the trick? It's of course the tools we all know, that is to prioritize, to simplify, to plan, to delegate, to automate. You all know that, you have heard that. I will give you 2 tips which I used myself and which were quite effective. The first is, if you prioritize, do it radically. Ask yourself the following question. What are the 2 to maximum 3 activities that, if you did them extremely well and nothing else over the next 3 months, would have a significant impact on your business and on your personal life? 3 activities only. And the typical answer I get is, this is not possible. I have more things to do. I have this or this or this. If it's only 3 things you do, or maybe even 2 things, what is it? And the second tip I have, what I use in my own life, is to introduce your personal incentive system. If you take time off, spend the time in a nice location, which is inspiring. So you're looking forward to do that. And basically, it's not the office, because if you stay in the office and taking time off, believe me, a magic meeting will appear and will fit exactly in the part of your calendar where you have some time off. Or make your plans public. Ask a friend to remind you that you wanted to take some time off, and ask him to give you a very hard time if you try to explain him that this week, unfortunately, it doesn't work. And if this all doesn't work, and if you don't succeed, then you have to consider a radical step. That could be a several-day retreat without smartphones, without anything. And the focus is just on confronting with yourself. That is an abrupt stop. That's a shock to the system. But in this this action or this shock, this can open up a mental space where the old things can be processed and new things can emerge. I have been doing this retreat thing for 20 years, 2 to 3 times a year, over a long weekend in a monastery. Trust me, it works wonders. So one way or another, it will work. But reducing speed, learning to read the inner warning light and taking time off is the key thing to do.
So I'm curious to hear, when you've talked to clients about this radical prioritization, Christian, could you give an example of what those 2 or 3 things might be? Or maybe you have that from your own experience that you could share with us?
So typically we all know this difference between urgent and important. So I want to change the strategy of my company or whatever. If I'm an entrepreneur, I want to work on a long-term strategy or introduce something. I can't find the time right now because there's all these activities that have legs. I'm saying they have legs because they come to my office. I don't have to call them. That is, we have a problem here, we have a problem there. I have to do this, I have to do that. The week is over and I haven't worked on my strategy. My strategy doesn't have legs. I have to come to my strategy. I have to do that. And that is the big difference. So I need to reserve time to work on that. If I want to change career, I need to reserve time maybe to do the next training. Like I did a coaching training while being a consultant. Yeah, so it would have been easy to fit in the next consulting project. I need to do this. If I say, I want in 3 months from now, 1 year from now, this is where I want to be. And if I have a picture, I can easily or more easily define the actions I have to take to get there. And then I have to reserve. And that's the time I'm talking about. It's these things that don't come naturally to me. I have to run after them. I have to reserve time for them. That's it, what I'm talking about.
Thank you. That's helpful. So let's talk about removing, because the book talks about the importance of letting go of these old habits and behaviors. So why is that so important, and how do you go about letting go of those old habits that are no longer serving you?
I would love to start with a story again. I love stories. And I most love Zen stories. I know so many of them. There's a famous Zen story, and that is a story about a scientist and a Zen master. Some of you might know that. The scientist comes to the Zen master to learn more about Zen, and the Zen master offers his guest a cup of tea. While he is preparing the tea, the scientist speaks without drawing breath and expounds his own theory about Zen. He talks and talks and talks. And while he talks, the Zen master continues to pour tea from the pot. And eventually the cup overflows. So the scientist looks at this and says, "What are you doing? You're spilling it everywhere." And the Zen master replies, "You can't pour tea into a full cup." So why am I telling that? Our heads are full to the brim with information, like the cup of tea. They are overflowing. There is no spare capacity for absorbing new things, not to speak about absorbing change or personal change. Peter Drucker, the management guru, once said, "We spend a lot of time teaching leaders what to do. We don't spend enough time to tell them what to stop." So my feeling is, from time to time, we need to examine what I call the expiration date of the accumulated knowledge in our heads. We need to clear out and to dispose what we no longer need, or what might even become an active hindrance for our next step. All these things, they have to go. It's old beliefs, skills we don't no longer need, old information, etc. If we come back to the car analogy, this is like when we change oil. First, we drain the old oil and then we fill in the new oil. The challenge is that this also means disposing habits and principles that made us successful in the past. Maybe these habits and principles are the reason why we are where we are now. We are very successful because I was super strong in analyzing things myself. I'm the best analyzer in the world. Now I'm in a leadership position. But now this habit becomes a problem, and I have to get rid of it and to focus on other things. And that is inherently paradoxical. Marshall Goldsmith, the management guy, guru, wrote a wonderful book, and all you need is the title. You don't have to read the book. The book is fantastic, but the title says it all. What got you here won't get you there. And I can't repeat that title often enough because it's so important at these career stages. What got you here won't get you there. And that's so difficult to let that go. And that's the reason why I wrote an extra chapter about this removing, because it's so difficult. It requires what I call unlearning, the habit of unlearning. And I have experienced that quite often in my own career. One chapter was when I moved from a corporate career into a large consulting company, because I had to unlearn the corporate behavior, which I was trained for almost 10 years to do. That is thinking in silos. This is my department. I'm working in my department, and I'm not interested what's happening left or right. And then I moved into consulting, and the first thing I had to get rid of was this silo thinking. Now everything was about lateral thinking. This is my project, but it's very important what's happening left and right. But before I could do that, I had to unlearn this corporate thinking and corporate behavior. And if you want to do this, one of the nice exercises you can do, it's a very simple one. Every evening, do the keep, stop, start exercise. You need 10 minutes, and you just think, keep. Which of my habits and behaviors have helped me today? And you write them down. Stop. Which of my habits and behaviors have hindered me today, were a problem? And start. Which new habits and behaviors might have been helpful today that I might have to learn? And I have done this exercise, not every evening, I'm honest, but quite often. And that helped me quite a lot, because it's a reflective exercise and it shows you like where you are. So learning to unlearn and to let go, to me, is a critical element.
That's super helpful. So let's talk about this idea of replace, because earlier when you were mentioning the 6 R's, this idea of replace is the one that had a lot of resonance with those who are on the call today. And the replace section is all about creating new behaviors and new habits. And you mentioned in the book that willpower alone is not enough to create the lasting change that we all want. So what do you recommend instead of just relying on willpower?
Yeah. And we're approaching Christmas, and I was thinking of learning the piano. And I was thinking of a friend, and I even write about in the book. It helps a bit to explain the concept, because this friend of mine, he also wanted to learn the piano. It's a wonderful example to explain the problem with willpower. So he had this idea, I learned the piano, I will play. And he started with a lot of motivation and willpower. And he had this schedule where he wants to learn and to practice I think it was something like 2 hours, 3 times a week. First week, everything was fine, fantastic. We had a call, he said, hey, that's great, and I'm doing that. Second week, 2 practice days were not possible due to very urgent client meetings. Third week, no practice was possible at all, and after that, he gave up. And maybe that sounds familiar to some of you. Learning an instrument, learning a new language, learning something, we start with a lot of willpower, but then it fades out. And that's the problem. Good intentions and willpower alone, based on my experience, are not enough to affect lasting change. And the reason is that willpower is a bit like a muscle. It becomes fatigued if we continue to exert it over time. For successful behavior change, my experience is 3 things are helpful. One is a vision. The second thing is to use a change mechanism. And number 3 is to generate change energy. So what do I mean by that? With the powerful vision, that's a purpose, that's a why, that gives you direction, that explains you why you want to adopt a new habit or a new behavior. So you can ask yourself, where do I see myself 5 to 7 years from now? And which behavior do I want to display then? And this picture should be a very colorful picture. Really imagine 5 to 7 years from now, what are you doing? So my friend could have imagined he's sitting on stage, playing the piano, his family in front of him, and feeling that, being there, like it's happening now. Like the French author Antoine de Exupéry once said, you might have heard that, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men together wood, divide the work and give orders, but rather or instead teach them to yearn for the vast and open sea. So that is this vision, that is this idea which you have, and which gives you direction when you're doing that. The second thing is the mechanism. That's more a technical thing which you can use. Very popular are nudges. That's a prompt to remind you of the behavior. That can be a calendar entry. That can be someone to remind you that you want to do that. That can be kind of a scorecard which you write yourself, and then you look at that and you put it on your wall so everyone can see that. Yes, I've done that. So it's more technical thing. It's super helpful. It doesn't work if you only use that, but it's a very good support. And the last part is the energy you need to do some change. And energy, and I would also call it vibration. And as I said before, I'm a musician, I'm a drummer. And what you need to do is to establish a rhythm, and you need to keep going. Rhythm is something which happens everywhere. Our heart beats in a rhythm. The day changes, day and night change in a rhythm. The year changes in the rhythm. Rhythm is everywhere. Nature works with rhythm. If you want to build a new habit, use a rhythm. And that basically means do something, not everything, but do something and never break it. Even if it's just coming back to the piano thing, 5 minutes of practicing, even if it's dry practicing, keep going, don't stop it. The rule is one stop only. It's only one interruption. If it's 2 interruptions, it's too late. The thing is done. It's one interruption only. Except that, keep going. And that generates a lot of energy. It generates energy because it generates small success stories which you can build on. So that's the secret. It's these 3 things: the vision, a mechanism, the technical side, and energy and vibration.
That resonates with me so much, Christian. People who might have followed my Instagram or newsletter would know that I'm a runner, and that idea of the rhythm is something that I've experienced over 30 years as a runner. Of you have to just keep coming back to it. So you're a drummer and I'm a runner.
Yeah, exactly.
So focusing back on the idea of career shift or career pivot, I'm hoping we can talk for a few minutes before we go to the Q&A about restart. And I would love to hear your best tip, because we know we have some folks on this call who are in that place of the restart phase of their careers. So what guidance do you have for that challenging pivot that people are making?
So the best tip I actually got myself from someone else, and I think it is so useful. It was the most important tip for my career, and that came from Professor Amina Ibarra. She has written a book, but I've also seen her live on many speeches. And the tip is, act yourself into a new way of thinking instead of trying to think yourself into a new way of acting. By that, I mean, be active, go out and do experiments, do something. Don't sit at your desk and fantasize, go out and make experiments. So many people start a dream of starting over and do something completely different. I meet them in my coaching session. It's a board member who wants to try his hands on a startup. It's a marketing manager who wants to become an architect. It's a sales manager who wants to become an author, and so on. And many of these dreams don't come true because due to a fear of change or lack of self-belief, we just think too much. We analyze, we love to analyze our weakness. We don't think about our strength. We hesitate. We are torn between a well-paid position and the niggling urge to try something new. And in the end, we remain where we are. And the only way to escape is to be active, to try something, go out and do experiments. Yeah, that could be go to the next bookstore, buy a book on a subject you would normally not read and see what happens. Have lunch with people that you normally not meet, an artist, a startup entrepreneur, a competitor, you name it, with people you normally not talk. That will give a lot of inspiration. Richard Branson, the British entrepreneur, once said, and I love this, he said, the person with a skill set you might need to get your business off the ground might sit at the table next to you in the cafe, go over and say hello. And that's it, go out, try something new. And it's all about people. And typically they say the revolution typically starts in the periphery, not at the center. Yeah, if we think of the Reformation, the major movement in Western Christianity, it didn't start in Rome. It started in Wittenberg, which was 900 miles away from the capital in Italy. And the same is with personal change. It starts in the periphery. So venture to the bounds of your network, talk to people you normally not talk, and then you get a lot of new ideas, and that can help you to get it started. Yeah. And what's also important and connected to that is don't allow yourself to be stifled by the constraints of your existing story. People might tell you, or might tell me, Christian, you're an engineer, but now you're a coach. What's that? Yes, now I'm a coach because I'm developing. I was an engineer, then I was a consultant, and now I'm a coach. And it's very funny because before I became a consultant, people would tell me, you're an engineer, don't do that. Your story is engineering. Then I became a consultant. And people said, oh, that's great. And then I said, I'm now becoming a coach. And they said, why are you becoming a coach? You're a consultant. You're a great consultant. And you see that pattern. So you can develop your story. You can retell your story. And I think that's essential. So reinvent yourself, act yourself into a new way of thinking instead of trying to think yourself into a new way of acting. Hope that's helpful.
That's a very powerful concept. And I can see from the chat and the emojis that are flying that people are really resonating with your stories and with your energy and with your inspiration. And so before we go to the Q&A, I do want to take a moment to let everyone know that the book, Remove, Replace, Restart is now available. You can buy it today at all the major online retailers, and Wendy will be putting the links in the chat if you haven't yet gotten a copy of the book. Now, a quick note for those of you who may have participated in the launch of the book and you've already received a copy, now would be a great time to think about if there's someone in your life who could benefit from these concepts where you might choose to buy a copy. Or if you haven't yet reviewed the book on Amazon and Goodreads, we would welcome your review to help more readers discover this content. Now, if you're part of an organization and you think this book might be of help, we would encourage you to visit Porchlight Books, where you can identify some bulk discounts on the book. We'd also love to invite you to visit Christian's website to sign up to get his Greiser advisory newsletter. There's some good rhyming there. And we would encourage you to stay in touch with Christian on LinkedIn and Instagram. One more note about LinkedIn. We do have a brand new community called the Weaving Influence Community. And if you would like the chance to ask Christian some additional questions, he is in that group, and we would love to welcome you to that group as well. Later today, I'll type a prompt where you can share your learning from this event, and potentially you might have the chance to engage and relate with Christian in that community. So we would welcome you to visit and join our online community. So now there have been so many questions coming into the chat, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can. And here's one from Anil asking, please share a personal example of a change which brought about in your personality, and how were you convinced that this was the trait which was holding you back? Which feedback mechanism to trust, and specifically if the feedbacks are not consistent? So hopefully that makes sense. Wanting to hear about a change in your own journey.
Yeah, and I think that happened in my consulting time, and I think the toughest change I had to do was when moving from a senior project leader, which was called principal, to partner level, because that is when you also have to challenge yourself in a way to display behavior or to display things you might not really have. And I'm talking about self-belief. Yeah, I was strong in analyzing things. That's the reason why I was successful as a principal in that career. And suddenly I had to go out and sell projects. I had to go out and to meet very senior executives at C-level, C-suite board members at ICE level. And I didn't have this self-confidence. The problem was it was a catch-22. You can only sell projects to these folks when you display this self-confidence. And I felt maybe I don't have the skills, so I was very, very shy. And at one point, and the coach actually helped me to do that, I understood that I have to go out and display that, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable at the time, or felt a bit uncomfortable at the time. But that is the only way to meet these people at ICE level. And what I learned during this process, and that was very interesting, that I could actually do it. I could do it. It was just before that I was convinced I'm not the right guy, but suddenly a new world opened up and I really had fun doing it. And in the end, I would say it was also one of my favorite things to do that, meet these people, have this conversation, challenging them, etc. But in the beginning, it was a bit like, I think they call it fake it until you make it. So it was a bit like, I didn't have this behavior, so I displayed it, but it was more like I discovered I had it. It was just something I had to unearth, to bring up, and then suddenly it was there. And that was something, it was a change which it's now easy to talk about that. It was a process over several months and it was quite tough at times.
Thank you for sharing that example. And someone in the chat said, watching you now, it's very difficult to think about you not having confidence.
Okay.
So here's a question from Sonia. In the context of facing failure or a major setback, which R would be the most useful to tap into?
My answer will probably always be this first one, this reduce speed, because, and maybe I give 2 R's, but the one is you need time. First of all, you need time for reflection. So if there is failure, the worst thing you can do is just to ignore it. So I'm not saying you should dramatize, but give yourself a bit of time to think what really happened. First of all, is it really failure? And how do you define failure? What is failure? Maybe something didn't work out, but maybe it was a great learning experience. I had this so often that I thought, I lost this project, I lost this client. But in the end, it was a super important learning experience, but I could only use that because I took time to reflect on that and to take the lessons learned. So this lessons learned, that takes a bit of time, do that. That is super important. So, and the other thing is thinking a bit about this negative thoughts about that, because sometimes it spills over and you start mixing up things. It was a failure and therefore I'm a weak person or I'm a bad person. No, you're not. That is 2 different things. Differentiate that. And that comes a bit to the second R, to this resolve. Understand, try to understand this inner voice which is talking to you. This is the inner driver. And sometimes we have this. This is this little voice which is telling you, this was a big failure. You should have done this or that. And that comes from education, from growing up, and it is not always helpful. Sometimes it's the inner voice is the only problem. And sometimes if you're honest, maybe other people don't see it so critical. It's only you who sees it so critical. So take the time and use the time for reflection to understand the inner voice which is talking with you. And the one trick, by the way, to deal with this voice, because it's there, start making fun of this voice. Yeah. Next time the voice is there, just say, here you are. Hello, I've been waiting for you. Where are you? Because one thing what the voice doesn't like is if you make fun of it, it will immediately disappear. That's a small trick.
It seems like that might be a trick you use.
Yeah, I use it quite often. So when I'm a bit, if it's a failure or when I'm afraid of something, then sometimes I say, hey, there you are. I've been waiting for you. What's up? You're a bit late. And so then this annoying Christian immediately disappears.
What's coming in my head is I would want to just tell it to shut up, but I think maybe making fun of it would be a better approach.
Making fun of it is better. If you say shut up, it gets sometimes even stronger. But if you start making fun of it, that's not the dialogue it loves.
Okay, so a couple of questions here. Paul is asking if you could give a concrete example of the concept of reinventing yourself.
Of course, there is many clients come with this idea to me. I would maybe use my own example to explain it. I briefly touched on that. Reinventing yourself is really, so basically what do I mean with that is like when you start, for example, a new career. And like, as I said before, like I did, I had a very successful engineering career. It worked very well, but at one point I felt that is not what I want to do. So the difficult part then is, of course, that everyone around you sees you as successful in this career. So when you start telling them you want to do something different, they tell you, you must be stupid to stop this. So your friends and even your family might not be helpful in this situation. And reinventing really means to start something new by using the tools, what I explained before, maybe starting some training, meeting new people. And then at one point you have to jump. You just have to make it. And then you have to say, now is the next time. I did this basically 2 times. I started as an engineer, then had my career, 20 years career as a consultant. So engineering was 10 years. Then I started this career as a consultant. And I could have gone on. I loved the job, but I felt it's time to do something new. So I reinvented this coaching, Christian. And funnily enough, many of my old clients couldn't deal with it initially. They said, but this is the strategy guy. I can't talk about my personal problems with the strategy guy. That doesn't fit. And funnily enough, some of them now are coming back and say, but I see you've been doing this for a couple of years now. And so I try it. So it's very fun. But that's what I'm talking, that's what I mean with reinventing yourself. It's trying to start a new career, but it's more than just a career. It's a new working identity. Maybe it's even a different, hopefully a better version of yourself. Because what I feel by doing this over time, you get closer to your own to your own core. Yeah, what really defines you. You get closer what's really important to your heart. So listen to this inner voice, which might give you a specific direction. And sometimes it's surprising. You say, me, this now? I don't know, but maybe that's it. Yeah, so this is like going to a better version of yourself.
Thank you for that, Christian. So I'm very curious about this concept in your book called the authenticity paradox. Could you tell us about this? This is under the R called rigorously test.
Yeah. And I talked a bit about that already when I just explained when I was just referring to one of the questions. This authenticity paradox is also a concept which was developed by Professor Amina Ibarra. So what is it? As leaders, typically we are told you must be authentic. So you read that everywhere, everyone is telling you that. But as we pursue change, we are moving outside of our comfort zone. And hopefully we are learning. Or we might ask ourselves, by moving out of our comfort zone, are we maybe behaving in an inauthentic way and pretending to be something that we are not? And that is a bit of a contradiction. But in the end, if we want to reinvent ourselves, we can't limit ourselves to what we are today. We need to transcend our self-image and, as I said before, the constraints of our story. We need to see ourselves, and I would always say, as a minimum viable product, as an unfinished product, and thus moving out of our comfort zone. The problem is, once we start doing that, and that's what I explained a minute ago, our familiarity seeking inner voice will attempt to pull us back. So we show the new behavior because we are moving out of the comfort zone, and then we hear this inner voice. What's the point of being here? What are you doing? Stop pretending something what you are not. This voice is going on, and we have to deal with it. But that's the point. Learning often begins with what feels a bit unnatural and maybe superficial behavior. But paradoxically, in order to grow as leaders, we must do things that do not feel authentic in the beginning. They might feel more authentic later on. And that's what they call the authenticity paradox.
Thank you, Christian. So as we come to the end of the hour, just a quick reminder that if the concepts in today's event have been helpful to you, we would encourage you to go pick up a copy of Remove, Replace, Restart at one of your favorite online retailers. You can stay connected with Christian through his newsletter, through his LinkedIn and his Instagram. And I want to turn everything back to you, Christian, because I believe you have a closing story for us, and we've all been loving your stories.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, the story is just that you might think that you have all these things on your mind, but what I discovered, and this is something I didn't write about in my book because I was only aware of it after writing my book, that is, the process of writing my book brought up a lot of this concept, and suddenly it fitted together. There were a lot of things that I had around that I was carrying around me, but it was like sitting there reflecting. I was the first time realizing that all these pieces are there. And that's the funny part. By writing the book, I basically applied all the 6 R's in the book. I took time off. I reduced speed. I was starting to write that. I was forced to go down. That's the resolve part. At the same time, I was forced to remove things. Otherwise, I could have not written the book. I was suddenly starting to see myself in a bit of a different role. I was adopting new habits. That's the habit of writing. I'm now writing every morning. It's a new habit. I'm doing it since 1.5 years. I was testing myself as an author. And if you want, I was also restarting a bit kind of a new career like I described in the last chapter. So that's the wonderful thing. In a way, I would say I wrote the book, but I have a bit of a feeling that the book wrote myself.
That is so inspiring. Thank you, Christian. As we wrap up, I want to thank all of you for choosing to invest this hour in learning with us. I hope you'll connect with us over on LinkedIn so that we can continue this conversation. And I just have to shout out that Lisa Kelly mentioned in a comment that your book was her favorite personal and business development book that she read all year. It's extremely interesting, unique, and insightful. And I happen to know that Lisa Kelly is someone who has read and reviewed a lot of books that we've been launching this year. So that is such a strong endorsement. I wanted to share it with you as we wrapped up the hour. So this officially concludes our event. Thank you again for being with us.